This is not about blame, not about your mother, not about who was right or wrong. It's about something that happened before you had words for it, and why it still follows you today. Part 1. The pattern. You didn't learn to give. You learned that giving was the only way to stay. You give more than you have. You always have. Not because you're generous, because somewhere deep down you believe that giving is the only safe way to be loved. You read the room before you enter it. You sense moods before they're spoken. You adjust before anyone asks. Because you learned early that your comfort came second, and you never stopped believing that. They see someone who is easy to love, who never asks for too much, who is always there, and they're right. You are. But what does it cost you to stay that way? Part 2. The inner reality. You've been chasing enough your whole life. No one told you it was theirs to give first. There is something you carry quietly, a feeling you can't quite name, that you are somehow not enough. Not yet. Maybe never. You don't know where it comes from. You just know it's always there. You second guess yourself constantly. You wonder if you were too much or not enough, if you said the right thing, if they're upset with you now, if you did something wrong without knowing what it was. When someone gets close, something in you pulls back, not because you don't want them, because closeness means being seen, and being seen means they could leave, and that has happened before, in a way you never fully understood. Part 3. The cost. You became an expert at everyone else's feelings. No one ever asked about yours. You became responsible for how other people feel, without anyone asking, without anyone noticing. You soothe, you smooth, you make it easier, because once, a long time ago, that was the only way to make the air breathable again. Someone asks what you need, and you realize you don't know. You never learn to ask yourself that question. You learn to ask everyone else first, and somewhere along the way, you stopped existing in your own list of priorities. You are tired, not from today, from years, from giving what you never received, from looking for something in others that was supposed to come first from one specific place and didn't. Part 4. The origin. You weren't born this careful. You were just never safe enough to be anything else. There is a word for this. The gap between what you needed and what you actually received. Not abuse, not neglect, not drama. Just a gap between what a child needs to feel seen and what was actually given. And children fill that gap the only way themselves. It was rarely intentional. She probably did the best she could with what she had, with what she was never given either. The wound doesn't come from cruelty. It comes from absence, from the things that were never said, the comfort that never came, the moment you needed to be held and weren't. So you built strategies, ways to survive, ways to be loved without risking rejection. Give more, ask for less, be easy, disappear when needed. Those strategies worked. They kept you safe. The problem is, you never stopped using them, even when you no longer needed to. Part 5. The permission. You don't have to keep paying for a debt that was never yours. You don't have to forgive her right now. You don't have to understand her. You don't have to make peace with something that still hurts. This is not about her. This has never been about her. This is about you and what you have been carrying without knowing you were allowed to put it down. Not, I am too needy, but I had needs that were never met. Not, I am too sensitive, but I was never taught that my feelings were allowed to take up space. Not, I am broken, but I was shaped by a gap that was never mine to fill. I don't know how long you've been carrying this. I don't know what it felt like to grow up in that gap. But I know this, it was never your fault. You didn't fail to be enough. Enough was just never given to you in the way you needed it. And maybe, just maybe, you are starting to notice that you don't have to keep paying for a debt that was never yours. The gap. If you recognized yourself in any of this, write one word below. Not for me. For the person scrolling after you, who has been feeling not enough for years and doesn't know that someone else feels it too.
You didn't learn to give, you learned to stay. The giving was the only way to keep the room from turning cold, to keep the silence under control. You read the air before a word, felt every shift before it hurt. And somewhere there you made a choice. Your comfort comes second. You said yes, you meant no. You said fine and let it go. You kept adjusting, shaping space, so nothing breaks, so nothing shakes. They see someone so easy to love, who never needs, who never disrupts. And they are right, you are. But what does it cost to be that part? Maybe you were never too much. Maybe something was missing. Maybe you kept giving love from a place that was never filled in. Maybe you were never wrong. Maybe you just stayed too long in a pattern that kept you safe, but took you away. You became fluent in everyone else, every feeling but not yourself. You held the weight no one could see and called it who you had to be. Someone asked, what do you need? And there was silence underneath. Not because you couldn't choose, because you forgot to ask. You weren't born this way. You learned it, that less of you kept things quiet, that being easy kept love close. And it worked, it kept you safe, but no one told you when it was safe to stop. Maybe you were never too much. Maybe something was missing. Maybe what you tried to become was a way to stay within it. Maybe you were never wrong. Maybe you just carried on with the weight that wasn't yours for far too long. For far too long. There was a gap, you tried to fill it. There was a silence, you lived inside it. It was never your fault, you didn't fail, you just adapted to something that wasn't there. And maybe now you can stop paying for something that was never yours.